The wonders of Adobe Photoshop.
Okay, today we've been asked to put together one of our Milky Way panoramas. It's the kind of deal where we went out at dusk, captured a foreground, and then we captured the Milky Way that evening or the evening before. No, actually, this was that evening. And how we would go about processing this to assemble it together. So to start off with, as we discussed in a previous video, we want to reduce the noise in our Milky Way capture because it was done with a high ISO. So we'll take these images that make up the panorama for the Milky Way into Camera Raw, where we'll select them all. So Control A, Command A if you're a Mac user. Once the selection is made of all of them, we'll come down to the Detail tab and click on Denoise, and it will denoise all of them. So we'll click Enhance Photos. Okay, so it's done. It's created a new DNG file with the denoised image file. So we've basically doubled how many of these raw files we have, and one of them is denoised. Let's go ahead and say done. So we close Camera Raw and we're back into Bridge, and we'll see now that we have one that has been denoised, the noise reduction, and then the original one. I would like to be working with just the denoised ones. So I'm going to rearrange my window here in Bridge and go down through here. And to keep it simple, give all of these denoised image files a rating or a ranking, some way of denoting them. I'm going to give them all a 1 star. And now I can filter for just the 1-star images, and we'll pull this apart a little bit. We'll select the top one, and we'll just go through here, and we'll see that we've done a panorama of the sky. There's quite a bit of overlap. We'll take these images, all 12 of these Milky Way panorama images, back into Camera Raw. One of the concerns we might have if we were to put this together as a panorama is that on the edges, let's go out here where we see the stars. On the edges of these wide angle lenses, we sometimes have some distortions of the stars. So if we overlap plenty in the field, then now in post-processing, we can kind of crop out the outer edges, still have plenty of overlap for the panorama to go together, but then we're using the sweet spot of the image, and we just get better looking stars throughout. So we'll crop. Let's crop this one. And we'll call up the crop tool. We'll not constrain the aspect ratio. We don't need a lot of this foreground. This foreground really doesn't do anything for us. It just takes up space in memory. And as we were talking about, we do not want to have all the stars up here out on the edges. We're not intending to go that high. And not only that, those are kind of stretched and they're not as in attractive shape, just due to the wide angle nature, what the wide angle does. So we're going to crop off the edge stars. We've got plenty of overlap here on the panorama. So let's just do something like this. And let's select all of the images. Run up to sync settings. We'll check none. All we really want to do is take the crop and apply it across the same crop across all of the images here. We'll say OK. And yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll say done. So one of the problems with Camera Raw, if we just went to put the panorama together after we did this cropping, it wouldn't recognize that we were only trying to work with this cropped area. It would ignore the crop. So to commit the panorama to only putting together this cropped version, we're going to convert all of these images to TIFF files and then put the TIFFs together as a panorama. That will ensure that we are just taking the smaller section of the overall image. So to create TIFFs of these 12 raw files that have been denoised, in a Bridge, we go to Tools, we click on Tools, then we run down to Photoshop, down and over to Image Processor. We've got Save as a TIFF selected here, and this will actually open the images, create TIFFs out of them, and save them in the exact same location. It'll actually put it in a subfolder labeled TIFF. We'll click on Run. And now we have in Bridge, if we uncheck our filter for star ratings, we'll see that we have inside here the cropped version of all of those files, and they're now TIFFs. So we'll select them all, Control A on the keyboard, Command A for Mac users. We'll take them back into Camera Raw. Again, these are things you can do in Lightroom. I use Raw and Bridge. We'll select them all again, so that's going to be Control A, Command A. And then to make a panorama out of these, we'll hover over the three dots and then merge to panorama. And it looks like pretty level. That's not tipped too much. I might do just a little boundary, little bit of this, not much. Just tug it out a little bit. That probably looks about right. And let's see here. What about auto crop? Well, that should be fine. I don't think we're going to need more than that of the image. If I'm wrong, we'll redo it. Click on Merge. It's going to save it. I don't really need it buried way down in that TIFF folder. Let's back it up here to where we're working on the images. And click on Save. So there's the panorama being assembled. And we'll say Done. Now we'll go back up one level because we don't need to be in that TIFF subfolder anymore. There's that raw panorama. Incidentally, if you discover that you think you're doing everything right, but it's taking long and you're not able to get your panorama assembled and you're really not sure why, it's entirely possible. We've seen this before. If the horsepower of your computer isn't quite strong enough, if it doesn't have enough gusto, instead of saying, hey, your computer's doesn't have the capability of processing this, it'll just say, unable to assemble. So if you're running into problems, it may not be a real problem with your files as much as a problem with the horsepower of the computer. All right, so let's go down here and assemble the panorama. This is something you can, it's very hard to photograph a panorama of the Milky Way at night and have any detail in the foreground. So doing it this way, where we photograph the detail at dusk and then get the Milky Way, run down a road to where you get an opening in the sky and get that Milky Way captured, then assembling them this way is really an effective way of making it happen. So we'll assemble the panorama of the foreground the same way we assemble our panoramas in general, which is we make a selection of them, take them into Camera Raw. Again, if you're a Lightroom user, just do it in Lightroom. Select them all here in Camera Raw, hover over any one of them, doesn't really matter. Go to the three dots, click on the three dots, and then click Merge to Panorama. That looks okay, but I don't like this. This is a little too tight. So let's take off the auto crop. And boy, that wasn't quite as level as the previous one. What would we want to do here? I probably will straighten this somewhat and crop it later on. Is there any boundary warping? We might. No, I don't. Actually, the things look realistically straight. I don't really want to mess with that at all. So we'll say merge. Click on save. To level it here, click on crop. Hover over the rotate, click on the rotate handle, and just watch your image and just rotate it to get it looking more level. And I think that actually looks to be about right. And in doing so, now when we come down to crop on this, we have a bit more sky. That auto crop that it did earlier, I think I like this image brought up to about the bottom of these rocks. I don't really care to see that much of the end there. I kind of favor it more like this. And then we'll bring this on over, get it snugged up next to this. Like this. Oh, maybe back just a hair more. Yeah. Get a little bit more of a feel of an entry point over here. Maybe something like that. Bring it down just a hair more. And enter on the keyboard. That's our foreground. We'll say done. So to start the assembly process on this, we're going to go ahead and open just the panorama of the foreground first into Photoshop. And we'll take it all the way through. And now we're going to go back into Bridge and open the panorama of the Milky Way. These are different sizes, so opening them this way means we maintain the aspect ratio of the foreground. If we open them together as layers, the aspect ratio of the foreground wouldn't be maintained. So it keeps it simpler to do it this way. And now we'll go ahead and select all of this image. Basically, we're going to copy and paste it into this file right here. So to make a selection of it, I use keyboard shortcuts. You can always do the old select all, edit, copy, click on the image you want to paste it into, then edit, paste. Keyboard shortcuts kind of go faster with that. Okay, our next step is to make selection of this sky from the foreground. So select sky. And then we want to take that selection and put it as a mask onto this layer. So we've selected the layer. Click on the little symbol down here for making a mask from a selection. There we go. Actually, it just makes a mask. And if you have a selection, it creates a mask based on that selection. Now I want to move around the Milky Way because I'm going to look at my phone where I have the screen capture of photo pills in this scene. And I want to arrange the Milky Way in the right position. So if you click on that little centerpiece right there, it'll unlock, which means the mask will stay in place. And then as long as I make sure the outline, see how the outline moves back and forth? I want to make sure the outline is over here on the pixels. Then when I come over into the image and use the move tool, I'm moving the pixel layers, in this case of the Milky Way. And I know the Milky Way was over here, and I'm going to look to line this up. Okay. So as I look at my phone, I see that this is about the proper place. Maybe down, if I can get it down just a smudge. Yeah. For the Milky Way to be in this time of year. Now to get rid of these annoying little lines, I'll go back to my magnifying glass tool. And let's see if there's any edge problems. Well, it's a little bit of a strange glow. As we learned last time in our last video, we can deal with this with a little bit of mask refinement. I may want to come back and use this mask, so I do not want to do anything directly on this. I'm going to make a copy of the layer so that when I'm working on this, I can always revert back to this in case I mess something up. So to make a copy of this layer, as long as it's selected, whatever layer is selected, if you press Control or Command with Mac, then the letter J while holding the Control key down, it'll make a copy of the layer. And then I'm going to press the Alt key down, and this will be the Option key on Mac, and I'm going to click on the thumbnail. And we're going to see the reason that we are seeing a little bit of a blue line here, a little bit of a hinkiness here, is because we do not have a perfectly sharp mask. When you use Sky Select, it actually bleeds over a little bit into your foreground and a little bit into the sky. So what we want to do is refine this mask. Okay, so we have some issues here. We've got the stars bleeding through in a little bit right here in this dark area where the mask is supposed to be dark. Let's toggle this off so this no longer has an impact on the image, because this is actually what we think we're refining right now. So this mask, remember, it's a little bit gray there. So the stars are going to be bleeding through. With the mask selected, I can come over here to Image, Adjustments, and in this case, anything that's not grayed out, I can make these adjustments, and it'll be actually being done to the mask. Let's make a levels adjustment. So what I want are these gray areas on the mask over here to get darker to 100% black, and then we won't see the stars bleeding through here. So as I take the black point and move it to the right on here, those pixels that were gray are now purely black. Now, over here, we have some very, very, very light gray pixels. We want to take those and make those purely white. And as we do that, we can fine tune that edge where it needs to be. There we go. We'll say okay. Okay, so as we're looking at this, we can tell that the outline interface looks really good. Let's go out near the edges, because that's where there's a little problem there. This looks good over here. Let's get across to the other side. By and large, this looks really good. It starts to get a little goofy right there. And down here, this edge here looks a little bit goofy. So let's show you how we're going to deal with this. This is actually going to be a pretty simple fix. If you're wanting to see some of the other fixes we can do to edges, the video before, where we're working on just a single blend of a foreground and Milky Way image, kind of goes into some more details of some other fixes. But since this will be a pretty easy fix, I'll run you through that right now. So what we want to do is refine this mask. So let's click on it. Incidentally, I've relocked these together. Let's click on the mask. And in the Properties tab, when we make sure the mask has been clicked on, we can click up here on this text that says Select and Mask. And in here, there's a couple of things I want to point out. This is really important for us. What view are we on? I don't like the default view. I like working on layers so we can see real time what our impact is going to be done. So working on layers is very important. And the other thing to be aware of is when we get done doing whatever it is we're going to do in here, it's going to output to a new layer with a mask. So what are we going to do here? Well, this is going to be a real simple adjustment. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so y'all can see this better. Oh, that's a little much. Oh, 200% is good. We're going to take the edge and shift it. If we go the wrong way and we open up more, that exaggerates the problem. But if we go all the way to the plus side, it removes the problem. So that's all we need to do. When I click OK here, it's going to create a new layer with that layer mask. Click OK. Now there's a new layer with the layer mask. This particular layer has that shift of edge across the entire image. We had already decided that it was just fine in these other places here. I don't really want to do that everywhere. I just wanted to do that in those areas where there were problems. So I'm going to take this layer and put it inside a group. And then I'm going to put a mask on that. Oh, let me put it inside first. There we go. Now that is inside here. We can close it up. I want to put a mask on this group. And I want to make the mask black. So Control I, Command I in your Mac world. I want this eyeball toggled back on because this is where it solved the problem everywhere except over in here. Over in here, we solved that problem with this refined mask here. So all I need to do now is paint white on this mask in the areas where it solved the problem, and we'll have that edge look proper through here. So let's use our brush tool. B is the keyboard shortcut. Make sure white is the foreground color over here. And as we click and paint or brush through here, it allows, the mask is now showing white here, which means the action of this group, which is nothing more than this layer right here where we fix the edge, is now being applied or allowed to be applied to where we're painting. Let's back out some. Okay, there we go. So basically the problems existed all the way through here, down here. Let me back out. There's no reason to go that big. Okay, that solves the problems that were there. And we did see something way over here. Let's zoom in on it so you can see it. That is not proper right there. So there we go. So that's all it took to refine the interface between the sky and the foreground. We can continue to work on this image. Maybe we wanted to make the foreground just a little bit more interesting to look at. Well, that means we're going to work in the proper sequence of layers. If I want to work on the foreground, I need to come back down here and work between here and here. So let's say I wanted to take this image into Camera Raw, the foreground image to Camera Raw, and create just a little more drama, maybe using clarity. Make a copy of this, Control J. If I make a copy of it and I take it into Camera Raw and I don't like what I got, I can just throw it away and start again. So I might warm this a hair. So let's take the color. Let's just warm it up just a touch. Seemed to, it looked fine, but warm is fine. And then, no, I don't want to change that. Let's change clarity. What does this do? It makes some things just a little bit more dramatic here in our foreground. Let's just call that good. Actually, let's open up the shadows just a touch. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Click OK. There we go. Now I can, if we decided we wanted to print this, it would look a little bit better. We can actually see the detail. It's not so muddy. Okay, let's just say we decided we wanted to work up in the sky. We're going to apply sort of the same technique. I'm going to make a copy of this layer because this is my sky layer. The only thing that's not here is this little area here. So we're going to make a copy of this layer. And we're making a copy again. So Control J, Command J, because in case I mess it up, I can just throw it away and back to square one. I want to work on the pixels. So again, making sure the pixels are outlined here. So we're going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is something a little different than we did with the single foreground of Milky Way. I'm going to take this one also into Camera Raw, Filter, Camera Raw. And again, there's all, you're wide open to do whatever you want to do here, right? I might do, sometimes the problem is Photoshop is trying to decide what you want to do. Just another way we can put a little more drama in the sky. Let's look at the before and after. Before, after. Yeah, I think that's kind of nice. We'll say okay. And it should apply here in a moment. There it is. Yeah, okay. That's sort of interesting there. And we can also still use our dodge and burn tool. I'm right clicking to see my options here. So the dodge tool is going to lighten. So we'll click on it. I want to work with the highlights. Actually, I think those are going to be midtones. Let's just guess. Midtones. Let's just try to lift the Milky Way a little bit using the right bracket key to make that a little bit bigger. Let's lift it right in here. Again, if I come over in this area here, it means nothing because the mask is protecting that area from being impacted. Pardon me. Okay, there we go. Got that a little bit brighter. All right. And I might run back over here to my burn tool, and it's set up to work in the shadows. And all I want to do is just bring some of these shadows down just a little bit, just to create a little bit more of a realistic looking, dramatic looking contrast. Just deepen some of those valleys in the Milky Way. I'm calling them valleys. Who knows what they are? That looks better there too. Okay. Yeah. So that is how to take a foreground that we did a panorama with and a Milky Way that we did a panorama with and assemble them together. And the advantage of this is when we show up on a beautiful foreground like this, we can do this composition here. We can run off over here and put the boulder in the foreground, do another composition. As long as we have light at dusk, which gives you 15 or 20 minutes to photograph, you can run around in a scene and collect a bunch of different compositions. You can use photo pills on your cell phone to snap screenshots of what the result should look like, because you can position the Milky Way, let's say at 12 o'clock at night or whatever time you wanted to actually get the Milky Way in position. And then later on, okay, you can get the Milky Way position how you want it. And then you can run down the road to where there's an open field and you can get a good view of the Milky Way pointing the same direction, the same lighting and everything else. Capture those shots of the Milky Way. In this case, we did a panorama capture. And then you can put that Milky Way into all of these shots you took that night, and it allows you to wind up getting several more compositions than just one composition a night. Again, this works really well in areas where we're not allowed to do any sort of artificial lighting. So, all right, that's the end of this. Hope you enjoyed it.
Ooh, that was interesting.